On May 8th, 2025, a Reddit user asked a grim yet straightforward question on r/askreddit, stating, "What is the most messed up thing you have ever done?" Initially, replies to this were filled with either obvious jokes or relatively tame confessions involving relationship drama. However, after about 30 minutes of the post being live, one user replied with a disturbing comment that stood out from the rest. It read, "I ran over a woman and her child in California in '96. I don't remember the specific city, but I'll never forget it was the intersection between Vanowin Street and Louis Avenue. I think the mom died, but I don't remember what happened to the kid. I got away scot-free, and I'm only telling this because the statute of limitations already passed." Now, it's not uncommon for people to just make up shocking stories on Reddit for attention. And at first this didn't look any different until another user did some digging and discovered an LA Times article from July of 1996 about what seemed like the same incident mentioned in the comment. That article, along with others from the time, not only confirmed the OP's claims, but also revealed the horrifying details of what actually happened that day. According to the reports, the victims of this incident were a 19-year-old girl named Ruby Moreno and her 1-year-old daughter. Ruby had taken her daughter to a nearby hospital on the morning of July 29 to treat a few minor cuts she got while playing. She stopped at a relative's house on Vanowin Street on her way back and was about to return home at around 10 p.m. But as she was attempting to get into her car on the driver's side, she heard a loud screeching noise from behind. She looked back and saw a car barreling towards her at 100 miles per hour. According to other witnesses, this car had swerved to avoid hitting a van just seconds earlier, causing it to lose control. Seeing this, Ruby panicked and started running from the speeding car with her daughter still in her arms. Unfortunately, luck wasn't on her side that day. Before she could reach the sidewalk, she tripped into the street and was struck by the car moments later. The impact sent her flying over a parked car and onto the roof of another. The baby was also tossed several feet into the air before falling on the asphalt. Miraculously, the baby didn't receive any lethal injuries and was able to survive without any lasting damage to her body. Ruby, however, wasn't as fortunate. She was rushed to the hospital but succumbed to her injuries the same night. As for the driver that hit her, witnesses reported him trying to flee the scene, hitting another parked car and then a curb before successfully getting away. And from everything I could find, the perpetrator was never identified or arrested. So, if this Reddit user was telling the truth, there's a real chance he was the driver behind the brutal hit and run nearly 3 decades ago. The report from 1996 also mentioned that the driver was likely intoxicated due to the way he behaved after hitting Ruby. And when asked, the user admitted that this was the case. "Were you drunk at the time, as the article says, or were they wrong about that?" "Inebriated, sure. More high than drunk. I was on a lot of junk back there." But the most disturbing part of his confession was just how cold and remorseless he seemed about the entire incident. "Why no sympathy? Was this on purpose?" "No, but it's been so long. It's like a whisper of a memory." "Do you think about how that child has to live without a mother now? Genuinely asking, you seem stone cold." "It's been 30 years. That child probably has children of its own. I seem stone cold because I've already been through all the stages of emotions. I've justified myself, I rotted with guilt, I've had sleepless nights. I'm an old man now and I'm waiting to die any moment. I can't change what I did. I can't even pay for my crime anymore because California doesn't send people to prison only on a confession, and regardless, my health alone would render me incompetent to stand trial. There's nothing tying me back to that day but my word." Which brings us to the big question, was the OP actually telling the truth? Unfortunately, the answer to this is a bit more complicated than it initially seems. For starters, his story does match an actual incident that happened back in 1996, right down to the exact intersection he mentioned in his confession. He also added several details that didn't seem made up, and even gave a reason for why he was finally willing to confess now, because the statute of limitations had long expired. That said, there also seems to be some potential inconsistencies. Some reports claim the driver was with another passenger, and that they actually fled on foot. However, the OP not only didn't mention any passenger, but also claimed that he still had the car. He even cited its damaged condition as the reason he became aware of the accident, writing, "What was your reaction to what happened? I was too hopped up on various types of drugs to notice. It was only the day after when I saw the dried blood on my bumper." This could point to the possibility that the OP wasn't behind Ruby's accident at all. He maybe stumbled upon the 1996 article online, memorized key details like the year and the street name to make it seem real, and then fabricated the rest of the story as users pressed him with more questions. All just to get some attention on the internet. But at the end of the day, we don't know. Although if he was telling the truth, several users have already alerted California authorities of his comments. In May of 2012, a Reddit user asked others to share a secret which, if came out, could ruin their lives. And while this post received over 44,000 comments in total, one chilling confession stood out above the rest. About 9 hours after the original post went up, a user replied with a haunting story of his own, reading, "I accidentally killed 7 people. I put a rag into a new water heater exhaust to keep debris out and installed it in a rental. I get a call a week later, there's been an accident. I show up and there's a ton of EMS and police. They ask me where the gas shutoff is, and I go down to shut the gas off and see the end of the rag I forgot sticking out of the top of the heater. Rip the rag out, shut the gas off, and headed upstairs, only to be told all the tenants were dead. I drink all day now and sleep. It's killing me from the inside every single day, but if I say anything, my family is ruined. We have a bunch of rental properties and we'd be shut down." This reply caught the attention of thousands of other users who wanted more details on what exactly happened. Unfortunately for them, the account that posted this was a throwaway, and the OP didn't post a single comment after that, possibly to avoid incriminating himself any further. But when users didn't get the answers they were looking for from the OP, they began looking outward, and it didn't take long for someone to track down the news article talking about the tragic accident. According to these reports, the incident took place on December 16, 2006 in Kirksville, Missouri, where 7 victims, including 5 young adults and 2 children, passed away in their sleep due to carbon monoxide poisoning. However, while this part matched what the OP said in his comment, the conclusion the investigators reached was completely different. In his report, the police chief spearheading the investigation stated that the heating system was functioning properly and was not the source of any problem. Instead, one of the victims' vans was left running in the closed garage. This generated a lot of carbon monoxide throughout the night, which slowly filled up the apartment and eventually ended up taking the resident's life. So, did the OP really get away with killing 7 innocent people because of his gross negligence? Sadly, the answer is not as clear-cut as many would hope. There are multiple possibilities, and any one of them could be true. For instance, if we assume that OP was telling the truth from his perspective, it's completely possible that the accident did have nothing to do with the heating system. But since the OP saw the rag stuck in the heater, he assumed it was his fault and has been blaming himself ever since. On the other hand, there's also a chance that everything unfolded exactly as the investigation concluded. OP just took this real accident and made up the story about him forgetting the rag for attention on Reddit. This would also explain why the police would let him casually walk into a potential crime scene without any supervision. We can even take this a step further and assume that the OP wasn't even the landlord and just read about the incident online. That all said, it's still completely possible this story is legit and that the rag was the cause of the deaths, or perhaps a combination of the van and the rag. The OP hasn't posted any new updates on his throwaway account in the last 13 years, so whatever the truth is, we may never know for sure. On May 2nd, 2017, users on June 7, 2019, a throwaway account made a post on the Confessions subreddit claiming to be responsible for the deaths of several people. The post opened with the OP talking about his life goal 4 years ago, how he didn't get stuck in a 9-to-5 cycle, so he came up with a different business plan, selling substances. However, this really didn't work out as well as he'd hoped. He hated meeting people in person and was constantly afraid of someone finding out who he was and where he lived. But then he learned about a popular marketplace for illicit substances on the dark web and started using that to conduct business. Things were going well, and even upgraded from selling just 3 substances to shipping several much more potent options as well. Unfortunately, what started as a major boom for his business turned into a massive disaster when he accidentally sent the wrong items for a few orders, stating, "I put all my addresses into an Excel spreadsheet along with their name, zip code, order, along with the amount. At the time, I was selling some super white powdered meth. The was also a white powder. Very similar consistency. Long story short, my Excel messed up or I messed up, and about 7 people's orders were filled in as orders. They all went out. I didn't notice and kept doing my thing for a few days. After about 5 days, someone contacted me and told me their friend died from my I immediately called BS and went to check my order log and scale up how much I had of my left. Well, I had about 11 grams more than I should have. I still don't know how it could have happened. I wasn't a user, but I definitely was high." Put simply, the OP accidentally sent a much harder substance to his customers. And while I can't mention its name on YouTube, it is known to be extremely lethal in even relatively small quantities. He later searched the names of these customers online and discovered that at least 5 of them had passed away due to his mistake. The sheer gravity of his actions prompted him to immediately abandon the drug trade and rebuild his life, stating, "I immediately deactivated my vendor account. I didn't even need confirmation. I knew what happened. I knew I just killed several people. I sold the rest of my drugs, converted my Bitcoin to cash, and moved away. Didn't speak to anyone for weeks. Found a job in a restaurant, living in a city I always wanted to. I haven't touched drugs since that day. I haven't had anything to do with that life since then." However, the OP ended the post by claiming that, despite getting as far away from his old life as he possibly could, the guilt of being responsible for so many lost lives still weighs heavily on him, and that the only reason he confessed everything on Reddit was to finally get it off his chest, hoping it might bring him some sense of relief. Now, whether this actually helped him feel any better or not is completely unknown. This was his first and last post from this account, and he hasn't posted any updates since. As for if he was actually telling the truth, that much is uncertain. It's near impossible for me to track down any news articles about his unfortunate customers, given that over 100,000 people every year lose their lives from that same substance. That said, many users in the comments believe the story was genuine, and some even express sympathy for the OP's situation, though I doubt we'll get any concrete answer on this confession's legitimacy anytime soon.